the December 18th, 2017 special meeting of the Board of Education. The first item we need to do is approve our agenda.
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, the next item is an executive session on a student-related matter. I have the motion. I move the Board of Education recess to executive session to discuss matters affecting a student in order to protect the privacy interests of the individuals to be discussed, with Anna Stubblefield and David Cunningham invited to be present, and with the board to return to open session in this room at 5:30 with possible action to follow.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. item, which is approval of the 2018 legislative priorities. So just to set this up, every year in early January, the Chamber hosts a breakfast with our local legislative delegation and invites the city, the county, the school district, KU, and Haskell to present their legislative priorities for the year. So we needed to put together our priorities and have the board sign off on them, approve them before that breakfast happens on January, I believe it's January 5th, and our next board meeting isn't until the 8th, after our next regular board meeting. So that's how it ended up on our agenda for this evening. Everybody got the copy of the priorities in the packet. I want to note that when we move to approve, there's 2 edits I would like to suggest. So first, does anybody have any comments, input, things they want to ask questions about?
I
Vanessa?
just have one, and in previous years, we've had kind of a general statement about just the importance of kind of a social safety net for low-income families. And I think that given like some of the research that's coming out of KU around child protective services and the increased caseloads and decreased outcomes for families as like the tax plan changed and as more families fell off of TANF recipient status, like clearly as a state, we are not doing a good job taking good care of people that are at most need. And that is affecting our ability as a school district to meet the needs of students. And so I know that that is not exactly related to school finance, but I do think because it is so related to the potential just impact that the students with the most needs that we serve are experiencing, some sort of statement, and I have not crafted it, but I wanted to float that idea and potentially under the school finance / tax reform, adding a bullet that suggests that legislators need to, do better.
Don't cut one in order to fund the other. I mean, that is part of the conversation that's going on right now with this special committee, is that they're planning to have a meeting this week
Right.
talking about the impact on the rest of the budget if they just take away from everybody else to give more money to schools.
And robbing
that
Peter
would
to
be
pay
the
Paul
win-win.
in this situation, if it means that more kids are going to be hungry, more kids are going to be homeless, more kids are going to be taken away from their families because their families become unable to provide for them, that only makes our job harder, and we're not going to be able to meet the needs of students in that situation. And so I think it's looking holistically at the needs of low-income families and recognizing the legislature's role in helping to sustain the people among us who have the least is certainly a key to helping districts do their job.
Maybe putting something in the aspect of supporting the families of our students to help their performance. I mean,
I think a robust social safety net is necessary in our state in order for our district to be able to do the best we can by our students. So maybe something as simple as that.
So is that kind of an expansion of the next to the last bullet point?
what I was wondering.
Oh, yes, under the school finance tax reform heading.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think I would suggest that we actually make it a separate bullet point from
Yeah.
that one, but
So you
it's
could pull
it's
out some of that and,
related, yeah. So I'm taking some notes here. A robust social safety net is necessary,
Maybe vital,
is vital.
maybe. Is.
Um,
I mean, essentially something that's like, please don't make our job harder than it already is.
Right. Okay, so something along the lines of a robust social safety net is vital to ensuring successful student learning within the district, kind of
Yeah.
thing. Okay.
I mean, maybe something as simple as that, and then keeping this in mind when changing the tax code to fund our schools more adequately is recommended.
Do we want to be as blunt as we do not support further cuts to social safety net services in order to meet the state's school funding obligations?
Yes.
Yes.
Both are important.
Yeah.
And maybe social services in that last statement
Social.
rather than the net. I think talking about the net early on, but I think, yeah, further cuts to social services should not be utilized.
I mean, yeah, I mean, you could go almost anywhere with that. I mean, it's not just social, I mean, we just,
Right.
let's not rob some other needed program or
Right.
service or aspect, even including funding infrastructure. I mean, that whole mindset at this point that
Right.
is, we cannot raise taxes at all, and so you must work within this lid,
And if they don't understand, maybe there's a Charles Dickens novel they can read before they go into session.
Okay, so without exactly having the language in place, would you be comfortable approving an amended version of these? And we'll craft that language, but to make those points that we just discussed, and get that added as a bullet point under the school finance / tax reform section.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And we fixed the election one, right? Is that supposed to be spring?
Our position has been all along that they should be spring elections.
Oh.
I think that, if I'm remembering correctly, that still aligns actually with the state school board association's policy. They would support moving the elections back to spring if that were to come back to the legislature. I don't know that there's going to be any real movement to do that this year, but if we still think it's important that elections align with our operational year, then I think I would suggest leaving that one in.
Oh, okay.
Has anyone seen data or analysis about voter turnout? It was better?
It was higher, but
Was it better for our race?
it was better for Douglas County, but what I read about it attributed that to Jamie Shue's
Mailing?
use of the mailing to encourage advanced ballots, that almost the entire increase was accountable to
Making advanced ballots.
making
easier
advanced
with
ballots
applications.
more prevalent. I have not seen numbers from across the state on that, so that's something that we can find out an answer to if that's out there. Okay, so the two changes I want to suggest would be also in that school finance tax reform section. There's one sentence that says 92% of excess cost and mitigate. I think that unless I'm not understanding it, it probably should say support special ed services and funding at the required 92% of excess cost. Well, actually, I could use some input from everybody else about that one, because I'm not sure if it's supposed to say and mitigate wide variances in reimbursement, if that's that's supposed to be a separate clause. When I read that sentence, it just doesn't make sense to me. Anybody have any thoughts? At first, I thought it was actually maybe supposed to say excess cost to mitigate wide variances in reimbursements, but I'm not sure that that's right. Right here.
I think, yeah, I mean, I think there's a word missing, right? So
Something
like, we would support special education services and funding at the required 92% of excess cost, and we would support mitigation of the wide variance in reimbursement. I mean, it seems like two separate issues.
what do they mean by wide variance in reimbursements, though? Are they talking timing? Are they talking amounts? Are they talking?
I think they're talking amounts. Yeah.
Probably because it's hard to budget for it
budget,
if
yeah.
it is, you know, like you have your staffing ratio, and then if
So maybe what it should say then is supports funding special ed services at the required 92% of excess cost and mitigating the wide variance in reimbursements.
Is that something maybe you can run by Kathy
Just to
and see what
clarify,
makes the
yeah.
most sense?
Okay.
I mean, because we could also make it a more general statement that we would prefer that we receive reimbursement for the special education services that are required, that we cover, right? I mean, or
Right.
whatever way that they want to make sure we do that.
I think the issue is that right now, state law says they're supposed to cover 92% of excess cost, and they're not even close to funding it at 92%. So, okay, so I have made notes about editing that so it reads more smoothly. And then the other change in the last bullet point, in the current last bullet point where it says about Article 6 of the Constitution, or lessen the legislature's, it says day, and that word should actually be duty. Legislature's duty to provide suitable funding to schools. So any other suggestions for changes, questions? Okay, all right. So I will make a motion that we approve the legislative priorities for 2018 with the edits that we have discussed.
Actually, Shannon,
Okay.
I think potentially we should pull that last bullet of school finance tax reform, have it be its own heading. Because I think constitutional amendments, you know how we have like school finance tax reform, governance, elections. I think because that is such a big issue and there is potential for
make it
action on that, that we need to highlight it as its own thing. Because I mean, I do think if the legislature were to alter the Constitution to change their requirement to like fund our schools, that would be, I think that's more than just the school
Okay.
finance tax
Maybe
reform
put it
issue.
at the top.
Yeah,
Okay, so I will maybe title that like Kansas Constitution Article 6.
Yeah.
Right up at the top.
Perfect.
First one, opposing amending the Constitution as a separate.
yeah, I think highlighting that is
Right.
important for people to see.
Okay, all right, I think that's a good suggestion. All right, so make the motion to approve with the changes we have discussed, separating out the constitutional bullet point under its own heading, fixing the sentence about special ed services, changing the word day to duty in that last point, and then adding a bullet point under school finance and tax reform to refer to the need for a robust social safety net being necessary to student learning, and that further cuts to social services should not be used to meet the state's constitutional funding duties.
That's perfect. I will move to approve that.
Okay,
Second.
all right.
And thank you for taking the lead on getting
Yes.
that language all in
Thanks for your
there.
help in getting it tidied up. So, all right. We are voting on the legislative priorities, right? And since you have just joined the meeting,
I'm going to abstain.
you can't. It counts as a no vote if you abstain. So,
Abstain.
okay, all right.
In good conscience, I can.
Okay. You want to get up and exit and we can vote and then come back?
Come at all.
I'm sorry. All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Rick, you may return. Right. Appreciate your understanding. All right, so I will take those notes and work with Anna and Kathy to get those changes made. We'll send out the revised version to everybody when that's done, and so everybody has a copy of it before that meeting. Okay, before we move on to our next business item with our search consultants here with me. Thank you very much. Just a couple of announcements. Want to check and see if everyone could make it for photos on January 8th at 5 p.m. So so that's our first regular meeting. We're supposed to have a work session on the construction projects at the at Southwest Middle School, starting at 6. So if we back up and start at 5, we can do new individual and group photos for the board at 5 o'clock, and then have the swearing in for our new and returning board members at 5:45 is the plan. Does 5 o'clock work? Rick, I know it was an issue for you today. You're out of school, so
So, no, that will not be a problem.
that won't be, okay. All right, so the plan then would be 5 o'clock photos, 5:45 we'll do the oath of office for our newly elected board members, 6 o'clock work session on the bond projects at the middle schools with Clark Huseman, and then 7 o'clock regular board meeting. All right, okay, great. All right, with that taken care of then, we will move on to our next item, which is our work this evening with Ray and Associates on our superintendent application review. And I have the motion for executive session. Is there anything we need to do in open session before we move? Yes. Okay. All right, with Ryan Ray and Gloria Davis. Good evening. Thank you for being here.
We're excited to be here. We just kind of wanted to.
Ryan, could you kind of up to the mic? Thank you.
That's so sweet.
Is this something that's for executive session?
No,
Okay.
this can be
right.
open. So we're just going to give you some data on the search, and it's good for your public to know.
All right.
So what we're looking at here is our sequence of steps taken in the evaluation process of the candidates. There's a whole lot of words here, but I want to focus in on certain specifics, okay? There were 934 individuals that were contacted by Ray and Associates regarding the vacancy. That's in regards to advertisements, us calling candidates, and our associates calling prospective candidates, as well as going to national and state conventions, okay? Of those 934, it looks like 48 states were represented. So if you look down here, we can see some of the biggest ones. California had 68. Florida had 38. Illinois, Gloria's Illinois, had 75. Iowa had 55. Maryland, 35. Michigan, 57. And some other big ones, Jersey had 28. New York had 46. Pennsylvania, 35. Texas had 60. Part of the reason why that is I was down at the school board convention. So, and then Wisconsin had 30. Now, how many people applied? Of those 934 people contacted, you had 60 people apply. So we're really happy with that number. It's a great number. I know that's a lot larger than the number that you had last time. So we're very, very pleased with that number. Those 60 people were pretty much vetted by Gloria, Brenda, Ralph, myself, as well as Gary Ray. And we took into your qualifications, and your qualifications are right here as well. Lawrence seeks a superintendent who has these qualities. On the third page, I'm just kind of skipping some jargon. Please feel free if you want to read it. Of those 60 candidates, we felt that you needed to see 11. 11 really fit your needs. So that's what we're going to do tonight, is look at those 11 and kind of critique them. Of the 11 candidates for Lawrence Public Schools, they are from the states of, number 11 right there, Georgia, Illinois, Kansas, Missouri, Oklahoma, and Texas. All 11 top candidates were telephoned and are still very interested in the superintendent position as of today. Okay.
Okay. All right. So with that, I believe we're ready to move into our executive session. So I move the Board of Education recess to executive session to discuss personnel matters of non-elected personnel in order to protect the privacy interests of the individuals to be discussed, with Gloria Davis, Dr. Brenda Dietrich, and Ryan Ray from Ray and Associates, and David Cunningham invited to be present, and with the board to return to open session in this room at, how long?
But if we go high, we can't quit if we're done. I mean, I don't want to sit there and.
So,
do it.
well, okay, how long do you think we need?
Us personally, it depends on how fast of readers you are.
Oh,
But
gosh,
I
we're
have
gonna be
seen
here till
this
what?
process go as fast as 2.5 hours. I've also seen it go.
Let's start with 2.5 hours then. So with the board to return to open session in this room at
8:30.
8:30 with possible action to follow. Do we need to bring our laptops in with this? No, okay. All right. I need a second. All right.
Oh, second.
Sorry.
All in favor? Aye. No, we don't.